Learning a new language is weird. When I was learning isiXhosa at university, we were about 9 months in when we learned how to attach adjectives to nouns. I can clearly remember the day that I learned to say, "My pants are yellow." Now, given isiXhosa's language structure, this is legitimately tricky and a worthy achievement. But it's also literally what any Xhosa toddler can say. I mention this because it's a similar mix between pride and frustration that I'm currently feeling in my climbing. And I'm going to explain why I'm struggling so much by borrowing a concept from linguistics, the idea of semantic density. I was first introduced to the term semantic density when trying to teach first-year philosophy students. Turns out, a subject like philosophy is very semantically dense. Almost every term we use has multiple layers of meaning embedded within it. And this is a problem for beginners. I think that climbing is semantically dense, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I can convince you that climbing is semantically dense, I first have to convince you that climbing is a foreign language to me, a foreign movement language. I was trying to explain to a non-climber why I am struggling so much with outdoor climbing. The analogy I settled on is that climbing is like a movement language. You have specific moves that you need to learn, and you need to learn the vocabulary of this language. You may actually have seen my little vocab test in my YouTube shorts. The 25 basic moves in this bingo board that I'm trying to tick off. This is important to me because I can't start using these moves correctly and seeing where and when to use them until I know that they exist and what they feel like. Sure, I still do them terribly. The pronunciation of my drop knee is way more clunky and accented than a fluent drop knee user. And my foot swap is barely intelligible. But as I keep using them, the moves will get more smooth, intuitive, refined. So in indoor climbing, these moves are put together into a sequence for you. The sentence is already written with correct grammar, if you will, and you just have to repeat it. This doesn't mean that I'm doing it perfectly by any means, but outdoors I don't even have that outline. I must put moves together and figure out how they interact. I must learn the grammar of combining techniques in a sequence that makes sense for the specific challenges of a climb. Which brings us back to semantic density. Let's use the most common piece of beginner advice as a climber. Climb with straight arms. As you know, if you watched my video where I summarized 349 minutes of beginner climbing advice, I really struggled to make sense of this advice. And I think it's because it's dense. What a climber means when they say climb with straight arms is not the street usage of the term. It includes layers of physical awareness about what that feels like. The body position, core engagement, shoulder range, that just isn't obvious to a beginner at first glance. And don't get me started on the semantic gravity of climbing. Every piece of climbing vocabulary changes according to the context of when it is being used. The usage of a drop knee on an overhanging climb is different to its usage on vertical terrain. Keeping your hips close to the wall is bad advice on slabs or for dynos. A knee bar is common outdoors but only found on advanced indoor boulders. And the list goes on and on and on. And I think this highlights the difference between climbing and all the other sports I've ever participated in. Climbing demands a high level of adaptability and problem solving due to its high semantic density and gravity. Climbers must understand and apply a broad repertoire of techniques that are often specific to each new climb. Running and cycling, and arguably even swimming and rowing, focus more on physiological factors, endurance, and the efficient use of energy. Sure, technique is still important, but these sports usually involve fewer complex and context-dependent skills than climbing does, which is pretty cool. Learning to climb is a learning challenge of a type I haven't had in a long time, that I haven't had since I stopped focusing on language learning, in fact. So just to flog the analogy to death, here are the strategies for learning to climb that I have stolen from learning a new language. Immersion. I am all in and surrounding myself with climbing and climbers. I'm climbing frequently in different environments and doing varied types of climbing. Consistent practice. Use it or lose it. I climb regularly to maintain and enhance my skill level. Passive engagement comes sooner than active engagement. Just like listening and reading comprehension tend to come before verbal and written fluency in language learning, watching more experienced climbers, learning from their techniques, and understanding why certain movements work in specific situations is a passive skill crucial for developing climbing intuition and decision making. Practicing with native speakers. I practice climbing where experts can see me. This allows for feedback, pronunciation and grammar corrections, and other insights on technique and strategy. And finally, cultural engagement. I am participating in the climbing community through films, books, and online content to understand the culture, ethics, and history of climbing. Oh, and in case you were wondering, ibhulukwe yam ityheli. My pants are yellow.